Hello and welcome to The Art of Aging, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. On this show, we look at what it means to age in America and in other places around the world with positive and empowering conversations that challenge, encourage, and inspire us all to age with abundance. Our guest today is Helen Dennis. Helen is a nationally recognized leader on issues of aging, employment, and the new retirement. She has received awards for her university teaching at USC's Davis School, the Andrus Gerontology Center, and for her contributions to the field of aging, the community, and literary arts. She has edited 2 books, written more than 100 articles, and is a frequent speaker and lecturer. She is the weekly columnist on successful aging for the Southern California newspaper group, writing over 1,000 columns, and has assisted more than 25,000 employees in preparation for the non-financial aspects of retirement. Fully engaged in the field of aging, she was a delegate to a White House conference on aging and is co-author of the Los Angeles Times bestseller, Project Renewment, the first retirement model for career women. Helen has extensive experience with the media, including Primetime, NPR, Network News, The Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, Sacramento Bee, and the Christian Science Monitor. And last but not least, she was recognized by PBS Next Avenue as one of the 50 influencers in aging for 2016. Welcome, Helen. So let's start by talking about your passion for this topic. How did you get into talking about the new retirement in the first place?
So, Beth, this is a story of 1999, when my good friend and colleague Bernice Bratter calls me, and she had just retired from her second position as an executive director. And she said, Helen, is there anything done for women who have been passionate about their work, have made an impact, and now are moving to this next phase called retirement? She said, I'm a little bit at a loss. So what does the literature say? And what are the programs? And I said, Bernice, great question. We are not on the agenda. We are not on the screen. There is almost nothing about this cohort of women as they move into retirement. So the passion came from the need. No one was talking about it. It wasn't a cohort, wasn't a segment that anyone was paying attention to. And yet, as the baby boomers are aging, we know there are more and more women who have had impactful careers moving to this next phase. So that's where the passion came. It was need. It was just an empty space.
And so you now call this Project Renewment, but why the word renewment? Let's start there.
So that's a word we made up. The women who gathered around this first renewing table talked about the term retirement. It just didn't seem to fit. So we made up the word. Renewment is a combination of retirement and renewal. And what's interesting, many of the women who belong to renewment have said, I'm in the renewment phase of my life, not necessarily the retirement phase, but implicit in this is renewal.
I love that idea. One of our guests at our recent symposium, Richard Eisenberg, has a concept that he likes to call unretirement. Are we talking about the same kind of thing?
Not really. Renewment is pretty broad. So you can be retired, you can be working part-time. It's broad in the sense that it would apply to anyone mid to later life who is moving perhaps to the latter part of their career and is being thoughtful about that next segment. And I think it's the thoughtfulness that is an integral part here. It's not a clear definition of you're either this or that. And it's also self-definition. If you think it fits and you want to be part of renewment, you're in.
So you had this conversation with your friend in 1999, and here we are 24 years later. What has happened since that first lunch and the launch of a book, and here we are post-pandemic? Tell us a little bit about the arc of this movement that you've helped to create.
So now we're talking 23 years later. The call from Bernice initiated a lunch where Bernice and I said, is there anything really to talk about? It was a 4-hour lunch. So Bernice said, you invite some like-minded people. I'll do the same. We'll have dinner. That was a 4-hour dinner. And so we proceeded to meet monthly to talk about a topic that was relevant to transition and change. Because I'll do a sidebar here. Renewment is about supporting career women through transition and change. And not only supporting, I would say supporting and inspiring women, particularly career women, through transition and change from work to retirement and beyond. There's no graduation. Transition and change is part of life. So part of the story is we met and we proceeded to meet monthly. We had no intention of growing, but then we had some women from the west side of Los Angeles that said, could we join your group? From a group process perspective, that can be difficult. We said, we'll help you start a group. Well, then there was another group and another group. Well, 23 years later, there were about 35 to 40 renewment groups that have been launched virally. Some have made in 2 years, some have made in 23 years. But here is the new piece. Here's a new piece. The pandemic hits. People can't move. People can't meet. So we made up something else. We made up the virtual renewment roundtables. And we said, there are 15 seats around this table, first come, first serve. Well, the seats were filled. And then there was a waiting list and another waiting list. And we just launched Group 15 with women from across the country coming to talk about the topic that's relevant to their lives, that involves transition and change and thriving. So that's the executive summary. But there's a story about the book, but I don't know if you want to go into that now.
Yeah, tell us the story about the book.
The story about the book. Always knew there was something here because no one was talking about this cohort. So the first 5 years, we took notes that were transcribed, not knowing what we were going to do with it. So we got a little press unsolicited from the LA Times and also another publication. And the CEO of Scribner, which is a sub of Simon & Schuster, read it, called the journalist who wrote the story, and they called us and they said, we'd like you to write a book. He said, we can do that. So 18 months later, we submitted a manuscript. But those 5 years of conversation gave us something significant to talk about, in addition to the research on the topic. And the last piece is there's a guide to the last section that guides you, how do you start a renewment group? What are the topics? What's the group process? So that's the executive summary. And all of this has happened without marketing. So we were very fortunate.
So what is it, do you think, that that makes this so significant for women? And have men tried to emulate this? And are there any renewment groups for men?
So why is this significant for women? Well, women's work career generally is different from men's. They've taken time out of the workplace. They've traveled with their mate for practical reasons. And so they have been kind of second in order, and not much attention has been paid to them. And these are particular women for whom work is more than money. So give me the first part of your question again.
Do you think, have men tried to replicate this?
That's a great question, because we have a partnership with a quasi-sibling group called the Life Transition Group. And these are about 25 to 30 men who meet monthly, highly organized. They have a topic a month. They're planned for the year. And our first meeting was around a conference table of 16 seats. So we took 8 women and 8 men, 8 of our women, 8 of their men, and we came together to talk about a topic. So the Life Transition Group is an example. But as men, and I'm making an assumption here, but as men are assuming different roles in the family, with children, with stay-at-home dads, etc., we are seeing men, not a lot, but more men's groups being formed. But it's not typical. And I'll add one piece, which is going to sound sexist, but I'm going to be brave. I've worked with 25,000 employees on the non-financial aspects of retirement. Men and women go about this differently. I mean, linguists will agree, and that women generally are very communal, and they get to the topic very quickly. And I would say men take a little more time, a little bit about politics, maybe a little bit about sports. So these are stereotypes, but I'm speaking in generalities. So I think the men are coming along, but I think women very naturally commune, if you will, and they get to the issues pretty quickly.
Tell me a little bit more about what are some of the things, whether it's from the work that you've done with employees and helping to prepare them or through the renewment movement. What are some of the general themes that you see people need to address, the non-financial themes that people need to address as they approach this transition in life?
So I think one of the primary ones is identity. And we have an essay in our book called Who Am I Without My Business Card? So that's a big one. Another is a redefinition of productivity. There are no goals. There's no managing by objectives. There are no rewards external. So the notion of redefining what productivity means. Another one is passion. People say, what is this thing, passion? You know, we never talked about it. This was not our language growing up. And what is it if I don't feel passionate about something? Where do I find it? Okay. Relationships. We have a segment in the book called Who Will Be There For Me? Who will be there for me? And in our virtual groups, we talk about resilience. We talk about role models. We talk about a sense of purpose. We talk about radical acceptance. What does that mean? Redefining relationships, priorities. So the list is actually endless for thoughtful people.
I'm sitting here beaming. I don't know if you know, but I teach a course through Eden Theological Seminary in St. Louis. We started this during the pandemic, so it's online. It's a non-academic course, and this is what we're teaching. It's for folks who are entering this period of life, and we meet every other week throughout the semester. And you just named the themes that we had identified and that we work into the course. So this is very affirming to the work that we have been doing. And and for me, part of it has come from listening to those friends and all ahead of me who have retired. And I can remember my sister-in-law saying, "Who am I going to tell people I am when I meet them for the first time, when I'm no longer actually teaching? I'm not a teacher anymore." And so that kind of started my energy and engagement in this process as well.
So Beth, you're really teaching a renewment course.
Yeah, right.
You have a group.
Yeah. And it's a little more formal. We take the larger group and divide them into smaller cohorts, and they meet in the off weeks. And what we did not anticipate, we've been doing this now for about 3 years. And each of those semesters, there's at least one cohort that has continued to stay in touch. And these are people from around the country. And that's something we didn't anticipate, and we don't make assumptions about it, but it happens. It happens every single semester.
So I want to just comment on that because we have found the same. I call it unintended consequences.
Yeah.
That people don't go into this to make a new best friend, but the relationships, because the values are so similar. You can come from diverse backgrounds, but the values are so similar. And we have found that these groups have been meeting, some for decades.
Yeah.
And we know a lot about loneliness and what happens with older adults. So one of our unintended consequences is that we have built small, enduring communities of women. And I think you have found the same thing. I think we're onto a formula. What do you think?
I think so. So what are some of the other unintended consequences that you have observed?
A couple of stories. We had a woman who was recently widowed, wanted to sell her house here in Palos Verdes. And we had another woman who was a real estate agent in Palm Springs. Not only that, she is a psychologist, so she finds the best house for the best person. They connected on Renewment. Within 2 weeks, this woman sold her house, moved to Palm Springs, and became a best friend. We had another case where a woman was a recently retired prosecutor in New Jersey, looking for what's next. We had another woman who was headed up Democrats for Democracy. Well, they connected and she got a new volunteer. But something happened recently, which I call a stunning moment. We have a formal collaborative partnership with the University of Southern California and Maritime Center. And we had a meetup with about 40 women recently. And we had a panel, and there was a discussion, and the discussion moved to caregiving. And a woman got up and said, and I know this woman for 40 years, she said, I have Alzheimer's disease. And let me tell you, you go to your doctor, and they say, we have bad news and good news. The bad news is you've got Alzheimer's disease. The good news is you don't have cancer, so you won't die from that. So get your things in order. So Carol says, I went from Alzheimer's disease to death. There was like nothing in between. At the same time, we had a PhD student who was participating, gets up and says, I'm working on a project to reframe Alzheimer's disease as a human rights issue and a disability. Consequently, these two people have gotten together. P.S. Carol was misdiagnosed. She lived with this for 14 months. She was misdiagnosed. Nonetheless, she's looking for her new mission. And this graduate student and Carol will go on this mission to reframe Alzheimer's. So to me, the moral of the story is show up. If you show up, things happen. So these are just, I would share 3 stories.
Yeah, the stories are powerful. I attended your workshop at the American Society on Aging conference last March, and you had us break into small groups and with a couple people who were sitting around us, and the conversation with those other 4 women, just within that 15 minutes or so was absolutely amazing. And the woman on my left had retired 6 months before, and the woman on my right was retiring the next day. And the other 2 women who are across from me are in the process of thinking about retirement. So I was the one that's a little bit further out from all of that. But yeah, I was really surprised about how quickly the conversation picked up, and there were definitely themes and connections from folks. So that's my little snippet and experience of renewment in your leadership, and I look forward to that in the future, and to see what else that brings. I want to move to another topic here because you led a meeting just yesterday. Helen is co-chair of the Ageism and Culture Advisory Group, Advisory Council, Ageism and Culture Advisory Council with the American Society on Aging, and we had a Zoom meeting with our group. And do you just want to share, brag a little bit about what the group has done, and the energy that's coming out of this endeavor? It's a part of, I think, maybe perhaps I'm making an assumption, part of your passion at projects at this point in time.
Yeah, I think underlying all of my work is to combat ageism, whether it's the workplace or the media. It's just so endemic. It's so systematic. So I'm co-chair of this council and have this extraordinary team. If you had to have your A team, this is the A team. And we decided to focus on something called Ageism Awareness Day. Now, World Health Organization has their own agenda, but there was nothing national. And we started small. And we started, what were the components to really make people aware of ageism? And so a great team put together the facts. What do we know? All cited in research, all based up with research evidence. What are the facts? And if we want to submit an op-ed piece, what is it that we have to say? And if we want to have a proclamation, what should that look like? So a toolkit was developed for anyone to tap if they want to advance Ageism Awareness Day. Well, it exploded. It exploded with, I don't know, a million references. And it went into nonprofit organizations, into corporations, into the national record, to 8 different countries. And it has become a big thing with the logo. And it has become a national mission, movement that is moving forward. So we have done a good job in the awareness. I think we've done a good job in knowledge. And I think our next challenge is, how do we affect behavior? Because we can be extremely aware. We can teach a course on it. But is it making any difference in what we do, in our policies, in our practices? But the impact has been more than we could imagine. But there's another, I think, moral to the story, not only the mission, but what can a volunteer group do to create change? Every individual had a part. And every individual has that capacity. So we can implement change, often with a team, never alone. That's reassuring as a volunteer. Because often as a volunteer, you say, well, what difference does it make? It makes a big difference. So we are very excited about Aging Awareness Day 2024. I also want to acknowledge there are many other entities who have worked on this. Changing the Narrative in Colorado has done extraordinary work, as many other organizations. But this launched it nationally. This gave it a big umbrella, and everyone could be a player within that umbrella. There was room for everyone. So thanks, Beth, for acknowledging that. It is really quite extraordinary what happened.
So I know that when asked, you tell people that you're an author, you're a columnist, you're a lecturer. I think you need to include on your list, and if you were to do business cards today, I think you need to include movement maker, because you've got the renewment movement that you've been involved with. You're helping to chair this movement about ageism awareness through ASA. I think it's a gift that you have, and we all benefit from your leadership and your wisdom in helping to guide these processes.
But thank you, Beth. Movements are never one person. And I think, I've had the opportunity of working with people who are ready to move mountains. And what a pleasure that is. I would say pleasure. That's fun. I have to say, that is really fun. But thank you, Beth.
Has to do with passion and also what brings you joy.
What brings you joy and what you really believe in. I think when you believe in something, you can sell it. Yeah. You can sell it. If you are authentic, you can sell it. Absolutely. So we're in the sales business also, Beth.
So Helen, do you want to just share I have 3 questions to ask you that I ask everyone, but before we get there, where can people find you? Where can they learn about your movement making?
So you can go to renewment.org. My website is helenand.com. And so you can contact me. I'm very good in responding. I have to say, in my columns, and I've published over 1,100, I answer every correspondent.
Wow.
So everyone gets an answer. And that's also building community. With movement building is community building. And I'll just add, I believe strongly in the power of small groups. Large groups too, but small groups can move mountains.
Absolutely. Well, thanks. Okay, you ready for the 3 questions?
I'm ready for the 3 questions.
Okay, here's the first one. When you think about how you have aged, what do you think has changed about you or grown with you that you really like about yourself?
I think I'm clearer on my priorities. And one thing I'm very aware now in this life stage, that I continue to have a mission. As long as I'm physically and mentally well, a retirement that would be exclusively leisure would not be fulfilling to me. I like grandchildren, I like travel, I like book groups, I like theater, but I have to have an overarching something I believe in to make this life stage, and actually all of my life stages, meaningful. So I guess it's not stopping because of my life stage. And that is very clear to me.
Excellent. And it's evident. It's evident in what you're doing. Okay, question number 2. What has surprised you most about you as you have aged?
Well, one of the things that has surprised me is how others have commented or perceived me since I turned 80. So I'm the same 79 as it was 80. So I have a wonderful colleague who, whenever we are in a public forum, introduces me. And there's my friend Helen Dennis, who's 80. By the way, I'm now 83. And they kept saying, why does that matter? So could be a compliment, maybe, or, oh my God, she's look what she's doing, and she's even aging, or maybe he's uncomfortable with his own aging. But it's strange. No one ever said, and here's Helen Dennis, who's 79. I mean, so that's 80. And the other thing that surprised me, I'll give you another example. I had some routine work done at a hospital. And I walked in, I'm reasonably fit, walked in, I sit down, and a woman comes over to me and said, would you like a wheelchair? I said, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't think so. But she just looked at my birth date and assumed I was in a hospital, so I couldn't move very well. So the response for a woman, I would say, turning 80, it gets a response. That surprised me.
So do you think you're experiencing more blatant ageism?
I don't know, because I've never experienced this before. And my age has, it's been irrelevant to me until someone just brought it to my attention. So that was surprising.
Yeah.
Surprising. And I don't find it a problem. I'm just saying it's surprising, which is fine.
What a gracious way to approach those situations. Okay, and here's the last one. And I think that this is easy for you to do because, as you talked about some of the things that you do through the renewment movement, you talk about role models. Is there someone you've met or someone who's been in your life that has set a good example for you in aging, someone that inspires you to age abundantly?
I love the word abundantly, by the way. It's a great word. So I'm going to do part A and then a small part B. So part A is my mother. My parents were immigrants, 1938 from Germany. Worked very hard, started from the bottom up, immigrant story. And when they retired to Florida, my mother continued to eat very healthy, in very healthy ways. Mother went swimming, volunteered, continued to learn, taking adult education classes in her synagogue. But beside the doing part, my mother had a grace and kindness that was very deep, forgiving, thoughtful, philanthropic. My mother spent her entire Social Security in various envelopes, sending them to people she knew who needed some money, but they never knew where it came from, which is the highest form of charity. So I hope to emulate those traits more than the doing piece, but what made my mother who she is and who she was. So that's your
How,
role model.
how
But I
beautiful. Thanks.
have to do a small part B, and that's Norman Lear. I do not have the talent of Norman Lear, okay? But there's this wonderful, it's on YouTube, it's called If Your Name Is Not in the Obits, Eat Breakfast. And it is a piece with Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, Dick Van Dyke, and Norman Lear. So all of these men, and there were some women in there too, but these men were close to 100. They were passionate about their work. They were successful. And they continued to do what they loved to do. I mean, one of the best lines of Norman Lear says, I don't know why people applaud when I bend over to tie my shoe. I mean, they had a great sense of humor. Dick Van Dyke was in it. That to me is possibilities.
Yep.
Even if society says you're still working, you can say, yes, I continue to do what I love to do. So the small d is these models of men who continue to do what they love to do and have great joy in doing it. Yeah. So that to me is an aspiration that I hope to fulfill. And I feel at the moment I'm able to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to our listeners for listening to this episode of The Art of Aging, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. And we want to hear from you. What has changed about you as you've aged that you love? What has surprised you most? And how do you define abundant aging, and who is your abundant aging influencer? Just visit us at www.abundantagingpodcast.com to share your ideas. You can give us feedback when you visit the Ruth Frost Parker Center website at www.unitedchurchhomes.org/Parker-Center. And Helen, tell us just one more time, where can people find you?
Helen and Dennis.com, renewment.org, and happy to respond to any inquiries and welcome questions about renewment, and happy to respond.
Thank you very much, Helen.
My pleasure. Thank you, Beth.